So, OBS, yeah, so it lets me stream directly to YouTube rather than saving it and uploading it.
Ah, brilliant, with the audio as well.
Yeah, and I've got my audio going. So, yeah, it's just going directly to my YouTube channel. So it's looking at this screen here. Has it appeared yet? It's like a 20-second delay or something.
Oh, is it like a live stream?
Yeah, yeah.
And it records it also?
Yeah.
There's a couple of million people watching it.
Yeah. Just waiting for it to go live. Live stream's offline. That's strange.
That's not the point. You never know what it'll branch out. It would be weird to change the screen. I didn't know that they actually assigned the tracks. It's more like furniture.
Is it appeared? Yeah. Does it say I'm online or offline?
Offline.
That's not good.
But it is there. So, you know.
Look at. Yeah. What's going on? Why is it not streaming? Streamed 1 minute ago.
Definitely thinks you're fine.
Yes. I'm not sure why. I wonder if it's the network. Let me try spinning again. Right, we're in. It's working.
Here and just watch it from
You can do, but you'll be about 15-20 seconds behind. Right, it's working now. So I'm closing this, otherwise I'll get feedback and I won't be able to talk. It is working. I saw it catch up a second ago. So I've done quite a bit today. There's a lot more code in that repo. But we're going to explain what it is and how it works. And then you've all got homework for next week. So, first of all, I've written down what I should talk about. So what we're going to do is, we've got a really simple web service that has a front end that shows some funky text in green on a black background because we're hackers. And what we were looking to do was add a test that would go to that website in a web browser, read the text and verify that the text matches what we think it should say. We're going to use the frameworks that we use here at work, which are WebDriver.io and Cucumber.js. So that means writing test frameworks in JavaScript, but actual tests, the bit that that read like tests, are written in a language called Gherkin, which is part of the Cucumber framework, and it lets you write in written language. Basically, it lets you write, given I do this, when I do this, I expect this to happen. And then configuration will link everything together, and you'll actually have code underneath that language that executes your commands and verifies what you expect. The simplest one that we can do is, given I go to the home page, then the text in this element matches welcome to whatever the text said. I can't remember. I've got that working, so the plan for today is to show you those, explain the code behind it, and explain the configuration, and then we're going to build a new feature and write a test for it in the front end that does a little bit more interacting with the browser. So first of all, and I will make this bigger, that's a log file, you don't want to see that. I should be able to make this bigger. This is our application that we were dealing with before. Now, before today, our entire application looked like this. That was what we had before. So we had two routes. We had a what's called an index, a home route. So this is when you just go to the website. This is the first page you see. And we had a /greeting, which wasn't necessarily a web page, but returned JSON data that said greeting is hello world. I've added one new definition, which is just a function in Python, and I've added a new endpoint. So I'll put those back in, and let's talk about what they are. So I've added a new endpoint here at the bottom called shutdown, and this is a post. So your web browser won't actually be able to see this page. You have to send information to this endpoint, and you have to send information using a different HTTP method. So when you access a web page in your browser, for instance google.com, what's actually happening is your browser is sending a HTTP GET request to google.com. There are other types of requests. There's GET, POST, PATCH, DELETE, UPDATE. It's quite a lot. Your browser can send POST messages, but typically it will do that when you fill out a form like this. And now when I press Google search, what that's telling the browser to do is take what I put in this form and send it to the web service via a POST message. So I can send that, and then you'll be returned an address to GET. And Adele's appeared, brilliant. I'm not clicking it.
Save that for afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. So I've got this extra endpoint that I was just talking about, shutdown. So when you post here with no information, this will take the process that's running our web service and kill it. That's all it's doing. And this shutdown server method here, is it too far behind? Sorry. So this shutdown server method is just a little bit of boilerplate code to let us find the process and turn it off, basically. I'll show you that working quickly now before I show you anything else. So in the terminal, in the same way we always do, I'll go to I'll go here, and then I will follow my well put together README, which is here. So to run the web service, I go into this directory. I've done that. We run this command, this long one. Wait for that to finish. We then we install all of the dependencies. And then we can run python app.py. There's a typo. Install my requirements, then run my application. It's now running. Let's verify that it's running by going to localhost 5000, which is where our application runs, and I've got my website. Now, if I use a tool like Postman, which lets you, it's basically a REST client, will let you do the things like patch, post, update, delete, and it's got a nice GUI that you can do this on. I will increase this a little bit. Remind me later. Let's close everything down and just have a blank workspace. So here is your method. I think I can make this bigger. Yeah. So here's your method. It's set to get by default, but you've got all of the ones I mentioned plus extra. Now we're going to use post. So I can post to http / localhost, it's auto-completing, 5000/shutdown because I've added this route shutdown. Now when I send this, I get this response in text that says server is shutting down, and actually if I try to now refresh here, it's no longer running. So it was just a nice little endpoint that I could add so that when we want to do things like run tests, I can have one configuration file that we'll get into later that will start my server, run my tests, shut my server down. And that way we have one command that will do everything rather than worrying about, is my server running, what state's it in, is it broken, have I done anything stupid? So that's the only change to the application so far. Let's jump into JavaScript and Cucumber and talk about the test. And I'm just going to run from the test into the code and as far down into the configuration as we need to go, and then I'll show you it running, which isn't very impressive. And I'll explain quickly what I'm doing here. I've got a few things open. So I've got PyCharm, which is my editor that I use for editing Python. I've then got my terminal, which is just for running bash commands. And then I've also got this other IDE open now as well, which is called WebStorm. WebStorm and PyCharm are made by the same company. They're made by JetBrains. Yeah, JetBrains. And JetBrains make different editors for different languages. WebStorm's for JavaScript. PyCharm's for Python, IntelliJ's for Java. There's probably a few others as well. I think you can get community editions of almost all of them, so you can probably download them for free. So it looks very similar, but this is now my editor for JavaScript. I'm just looking at the same project space, so I'll edit Python files in one because I get the nice syntax and the auto-completing turning up, and the same for JavaScript here. So this is now the structure of our file system, and I'll show you it in GitLab because it's easier to look at, and I can zoom in a little bit easier. So what I've done is I've incorporated a lot of boilerplate code, which is just unnecessary configuration code that we wouldn't want to go through building, and it's very kindly supplied by the guys over at WebDriver.io. WebDriver.io boilerplate for Cucumber, and there's a GitHub project. Now what this does is it gives you a space to drop your application into, and then you get a lot of the configuration startup for free. You even get a lot of the step definitions inside of Cucumber for free, and I'll explain what each of those are as we go through. But you'll see this code base here, which is the one that I have borrowed from, is very, very similar to ours. So there's a demo app, which is their demo web application, source test, and then a load of configuration files and some more configuration file stuff. Ours now looks like application, which is where our web service lives. Demo app, which is theirs. I've left it there so that people can look at it and play with it if they want to. Source test and all the configuration that goes with it as well. And our README is different. It's got stuff about our project. So all of the Python stuff I was just looking at lives in application. This looks like our old code that we used to have. We've got our app, we've got our requirements, we've got our tests, and we've got the templates that has our HTML file in. At the root level, we've now got source. This is the important point. Features, steps, and support. We're getting into the language of Cucumber now. So features are things like adding Super Bowl playback functionality would be a generic feature. Then inside features you have scenarios. So you would say a feature would be as a mobile user of DAZN, I want to be able to watch the Super Bowl. And a scenario would be, given I am currently watching tennis, when I click Super Bowl, I am now watching Super Bowl. That would be an example of a scenario inside of a feature. Ours are a lot more simple than that. Ours are very basic. But we can open them. So, in source, features. Now there's loads here. Everything at this level is all of the example code that came from WebDriver.io. Our features live inside training. So there's a separate space for us to put ours, and we've only got one feature, index.feature. Hopefully I can zoom in and out. No, let me just change that. Preferences, zoom.
So if it's I minus 1 is nothing, 0.
Yes.
It's I minus 1 with height.
So this is a feature file. Feature files in Cucumber live. They have to be a .feature. That's the name of the file type. And they have keywords: feature, scenario, given, when, then, and but. Feature defines the text basically of what your feature is, and I've got our feature is to test the index page welcome message, and I've said as a user of the site I want to be able to verify the welcome message content. My scenario is the welcome message text matches expected. Given I open the site, then I expect the element, here's an element ID, contains the text, welcome to the Automation Stuff web service. Now that's code, but it looks like written language, which is really is the selling point of Cucumber. That's why we use it. What I want to do is talk about how this is actually code underneath, because none of this comes for free. You have to actually write the code for this to work. My naive view of Cucumber is that anything under the feature keyword is actually text and is there just for reporting mechanisms. I think there are things you can do with the feature keyword, but we're not going to bother delving into that. The magic happens inside these steps: given, then, when, and. So given I open the site / so already there's some abstraction there. That's not the name of our site. We're just saying go to the home page, which is the root. So we must have a base URL for our code to know what is the base URL, and that's stored in a file called WebDriver.io or wdio.conf.js, and you can create multiple of these files and create different configurations. I've created one called training, so webdriver.io.training.conf.js, and in here there's lots of text, but there's very minimal configuration, and what you're actually doing is specifying which features to run and where your other kinds of files are stored and things like the base location. So there's this specs parameter here, and in here I've specified that all of our features live under source features training, and then anything including subdirectories that end in .feature. I won't go through all of it. I say that we want to use Chrome, but we've got this base URL here. So I have a base URL of localhost 5000. So when I open the site and specify a path, it knows it needs to go to base URL and then whatever path I've supplied inside my test. So that's the configuration. If you want to look more at that, just delve into it. The comments are really good, so you'll be able to figure out what it's doing. But let's look at the JavaScript that does this when I open the site. So this is a step. So I've got a folder inside my source called steps, and they're kindly broken into 3 files: given, when, then. Again, all of this I didn't write. This is come from this WebDriver.io boilerplate code, and I'm just using it because it's really handy. So let's open up the given, and this is where you suddenly see why Cucumber can be a bit daunting for people that haven't done it before. You've got a load of imports, they're very similar to Python, don't worry about those, but you've got your step definitions. So this is the one we're using, the one at the very top. You define it as a given, you pass in, it's regex, but it's Cucumber regex, so it's not quite proper regex. Pass in the expected step definition and then what to do with it, which has to be a function. So given I open the, and then you've got 2 options, URL or site, and then this weird regex thing, which is basically a string matcher. This is a really basic string matcher, and it will say just take whatever's in the string and pass it to this open website function. And if I open this and zoom in, this takes 2 parameters, the type and the page. Now type is because there's two parameters, let's go back and look what we specified. URL or site is the first positional argument, and then this string matcher is the second positional argument. So type is URL or site, and then the string matcher on the end is page. So I won't go into too much what this is doing, but this is saying if you supply a URL, use it in this way, or if you're applying a site, don't use the base URL, just use the entire site. So it allows you to go to different places other than your application. This is the important part. This is the first time we're going to use actually WebDriver IO. So this is the first point that we're not in Cucumber anymore, we're now using WebDriver, and we've got this browser object. It's a global object, and it's got a method called URL. So you can just type browser URL, pass in the URL, which came from our test, and it will open Chrome, because that was when we specified in our configuration file, and it will go to that URL. At that point, we now can do whatever we want with the site. We are automating the site and we have control of it. So this will pass. We go to that URL. Then, so I'm now going to go into my then step definitions. I expect the element, and we'll look more at this in a second, welcome message contains the text, this. So let's go and find that step definition. So I'm in the then files, and I'm going to search for this because it's not at the top, but contains. I've got 11 matches, so I'm going to look the text. Contains the text. Contains the text. So I expect that the element contains the text, and it does the same again. It takes a string matcher, and then it's got this thing, this sort of not operator. This allows you to have negative cases inside the same step definition. So I could say I expect the element name not to contain this information, and it will run through the same bit of code, but instead of checking do they match, it'll check, make sure they don't match. We're using the positive case, so we pass in the element name contains the text and then our positional argument. So it looks like there's two arguments there, or two parameters, but there's actually three. You've got your element name, you've got whether or not it's negative, and you've got your text that you're comparing to at the end. We go into another function, which I didn't explain where these are held. All of the functions live under support. So you've got steps, which are just your text matchers. You've then got support, which contains your actual actions and what you're doing. I'm command clicking, but the IDE is taking me into those files. I'm in check contains text.js, which is it's in check, not action, because this is a then. You've got check.
And this is all the boilerplate code.
This is all boilerplate code, yeah, that came for free. So I haven't written any of this. Exactly. Check contains text. So I'm in this file, and we can see it takes three parameters: the element name, whether or not it's a false case, and the expected text. And there's some nice comments up here that tell you what they should be. It's a string, a string, and a string. We've got this let, which is a JavaScript keyword. We're going to let the command equal get text.
This is just the assertion.
They've wrapped an assertion library around it effectively. And so the important point here is we're now going to use this browser object again. We're going to use the browser. We're going to do something with it with the element we provided. Now the command was with the important bit above, which is get text. So what I'm going to say is browser.getText of this element, and then if it's not the negative case, so the positive case, expect the text the bottom one, expect the text to contain the string that we passed in. If it is the negative case, expect the text to not contain the string. There's a lot of code there, but because this is all written for us, we don't need to go into it too much. We just need to know how to use different parts of it. So we're going to come back up to our feature, and we're at the point now where the only bit that seems a bit magical still is this element name. And now this is code I have added, and we can see it inside of our application. So I'll jump back to my Python editor, inside my templates, index.html. I've got nothing but my body and a paragraph with an ID, welcome message. Now you specify IDs with a hash. That's how you access them inside WebDriver IO. Now when I run this, let's talk about how we run this. I mentioned before that I could contain everything in one command. So JavaScript has a lot of nice, they're called either build tools or task runners. Basically they let you build up different tasks and you can run them all through one thing. You've probably seen Yarn or Gulp or Grunt. These are all examples of that kind of tool. I'm using Yarn because it came for free with that tool. And in my package.json, I specify scripts. And these are what get run by Yarn. So I've got this one at the bottom here, which says test front end. And what it does is it starts my server, runs my tests, and stops my server. So that's what we're going to use. I do that by coming back to the root directory, which is here, and you'll know you're in the root directory because you will have your package.json file, and I can run yarn test front end. Now I'm going to minimize this so that we can actually see if Chrome opens up. Hit enter, and down here on the right hand side you should see a Chrome window open. Eventually, there it is. It very briefly went to my website, checked that the text was there, and passed the test. So we've got a test that is running WebDriver IO through Cucumber.js. So we've got the foundation now to go nuts and start adding features and start testing them properly. It's a bit of a whirlwind tour, but we're recording, so if you want to go back through and step through the code and see what we've done, you can do that using the video. But what I want to do now is show you the process of adding a new feature and a front-end test that goes with it, because I think we can get it done in 15-20 minutes. And the feature that I thought about is on the front page, the home page, where we've got that hacker text. What we will do is add a web form with a submit button that takes us to a new page that presents that data in some way. So something like a username box with a submit, and then the new page just says your username is and the username you submitted. So that's something quite basic, but it's something that we can do pretty quickly. So let's zoom out a little bit, and we'll start with the HTML because that's the most simple. We can get that to render without anything else, and then we'll worry about how we use it in the Python afterwards. So I'm in my index page here. I'm going to cheat a bit and figure out how we add forms by referencing something else I've got. I know where I will see this. So I'll take this and then I will simplify it for now. I don't want an action. I don't want IDs. That's good enough. So what I've added here in HTML, and I've copy and pasted it, so I'm cheating a little bit, is a form element that has a role, it's a form, and it has a method which is post. Won't do anything because it doesn't know where to send it. 2 input fields. One is text, and it has a placeholder of username, and one is a submit, which browsers will know has to be a button, and it has a value which is the text that is on the button of submit user. So if I use yarn to run my Flask server start, and go to Chrome and go to localhost, I've now got a button and a username form, and you can put text in there. It's as simple as that. So now we need to use it. So the first thing we need to do is tell the form where to send the data when you press the submit button. And you do that in HTML with an action. And the action is usually a URL of where to send it. And here is the first time in everything we've done so far that we see why we're using Flask, because it has a server-side templating language, and it's called Jinja2 with J's, Jinja2. It's in the README, you can see links to it. And what it allows you to do is when you want to send a web page back to a browser for a user to see, you can add variables and inject them into the page before it gets sent to the browser. And you do it with these double curly braces. URL4 comes for free with Flask, so when you use the render template method and use URL4, you can just specify what route you want to use. And here I've said user, which doesn't yet exist, so we need to create that. So, back in my app, this is where all of my routes are for now. I'm going to add this new route, so let's put it at the bottom underneath the shutdown route. So app.route user. Now, I want this to be a post again because I want the form to send data here. So I'll do that with this method keyword, post, like that. And then you have to supply the Python function underneath. So def user is how do we get the data out of the form? So I'm at the point now where the data's come in because it was a post. How are we gonna access that data? And Flask comes with a nice little way to do this. We use this request library. So we have request.form. That is the form that we sent from the browser, and it's very kindly in a Python dictionary. So we can access it using dictionary accessors, which if you've used maps in other language, it's basically a hash map. But what key do we use to access the value? Well, we need a name in here, and we've already got one here, user underscore name. So I can say request.form user underscore name. That will be whatever I fill in that form. I've now got it in code, I can do stuff with it. So just as a quick win, let's do this, return I don't even need to do that. Let's just return it and see if the browser will print the name that we put in. So I'm going to, my app should be restarting, it should be watching and restarting, so I can refresh here, and let's just put in my name. It's printed my name. Let's actually turn this into, what time are we on? Let's leave it as it is. Let's just build a test around this. So I've done the implementation. I've got a form, put data in, I've got data back. Let's write a new feature for this. So I'm going to close everything. I'm going to minimize everything so we can see where we start from. So source, features, training. I'm going to create a new file called user.feature. No. index.feature, I'm going to copy the text here and change it because I don't like to write too much. I'm going to test the user page content. As a user of the site, I want to be able to verify the user page content. Let's also copy the scenario and we will change it as we need to. So the scenario is the user page message text matches expected. Good enough. So given, open the site, we already know it works, don't need to change it. We can put a when in here. So this is a step, this is a, not colon, this is a step. So given when, and now I need a way to fill in that form. So I haven't got anything here, so I'm going to need, let's just put a quick comment. So fill in form and press button. We'll come back to those. I can check my assertion at the bottom. Then I expect the element. I need a different element to this one, so this is a big to do for now. Contains the welcome, contains the text to do. So we've got the bits we need to fill in. This test is close to being done already. So we're going to fill in the form. Let's start there. This is a when, so I can go to my steps and look for a relevant step definition. And I'll zoom in a bit. And let's have a look for, I'm just going to start searching in here, input. So there's a couple there at the top. I've got add or set a string to the input field element name. That looks roughly like what I'm after. Let's have a look at what the actual code does in here. So the code will take add or set as a method type, take the value you want to put in and the element ID. So if the command was add, then we're going, sorry, if the method was add, we're going to use the command add value. If the command was set, we're going to use set value. So these are two different things. So from, this is basically Selenium base API stuff. Add value will add more text to whatever's already in the box. Set value will clear it and put new text in. We're not fussed about what was there before, so we're just going to use set value.
There's all that, and then below there's some more.
Then they check to see if the element exists, and finally they do browser command, which will be set value, the element, and the text that you want to put in. So we're going to use this. So I'm going to go back up to my step definition. I'm going to copy and paste this thing into my feature. So when I fill in the form here, scroll along. Oh, I've chosen the wrong one. Apologies. I want this one. Although that one I just copied looks like what we want next, which is handy. Here, so when I set, I've got a string value, so this is just text that we're going to put in. So I'm going to use my name again, Joe, to the input field, and we need an element ID. So let's use hash again for ID and go back to my code to see what IDs we've got. So index.html. This is the element I want to put my text into. This is the input form, but I haven't got an ID. So we can add one. ID equals user username input. Something like that. It's up to us. Username input. So that will add the text Joe into that form field. I now need to press the button. So back to my whens. I noticed it was at the top just now. I've got I click or double click on the link button or element with the element name. So this is going to be fairly self-explanatory. I'm not going into the code underneath because all we actually care about is the element name, and I think we're all aware of what click or double click does. So let's put that in here. I click once. I want to do, whoops. When I click on the button, because it is a button, and then again I need an ID here. So let's jump back to the code. It hasn't got one. Let's add one. User name submit. Copy that. Drop it in here. I've forgotten my hash value. And we're done. We now need the then. So then I expect the element, so I need an element on the return contains a text to do. So because we're just returning text, we don't have an element. So let's quickly create a web page to return that has an element ID, and then we can check that the text is Joe, because that's what we thought it was going to be here. So I'm going to very quickly add a new template, new file, user.html, and I'm going to add, why is this so small? I'm going to add a body, I'm going to add a paragraph, and in the paragraph I'm going to say I want user, and this paragraph needs an ID. ID equals username, something like that. Where was my to-do? Here we go. Hashtag username. The last thing to do is to wire this new HTML page back into the application, which was here where we were returning, just returning the name before. Instead of doing that, now what we want to do, and I'll comment that out, is much like this index, we want to render a template. So I want to return render template. Template name, I'll do it in single quotes, is user.html, and then the method render template can take positional arguments, and I can say user equals this bit, the data I had before here. So I'm passing in this positional argument of user, and in user.html I'm using it here. I'm just adding it to that paragraph. Before we run our test, let's rerun our application and make sure that works. So I'm now at /user, and if I inspect here, I can zoom in this as well. Yes. In the body, I've got an ID of username with Joe. So now we can access that in our test here. Let's see what happens when we run our tests again. So I'm going to stop my server that I've got running, stop, and then clear the page and test front end again. So let's run it and see what happens. I'll come over here so we can see Chrome opening. If it opens. There's Chrome, so goes there. Oh, and it's shut down. It's opened up again. It's gone there, it's put the name in and seen my name. It was really quick, but everything passed. Now, we're not going to fix this today, but it's not ideal to have the browser open and close between each test. There are ways we can get that to run, to stay open between tests and it just connect to the same instance. But that's not a big deal for today. We've just got 2 tests passing, and we've added a new feature in under an hour, which is pretty good. I've got all of that stuff on a separate branch where I've kept my funky green and black styling for the user page because we're not losing that. I'm going to merge that into master and then send you guys the link again to the page. What I want you to do is basically replicate what I've already got. I want a new form on the index page that will return a different page with some other data. How and what data you use is up to you, but almost copy, paste and change just so you get a feel for where all the different places of code have to change. If and when you find time to get around to doing that, let me know and we'll commit it to a branch and review it all together next week. If you don't find time, we'll do it all together next week in the session. And if you've all got your laptops, instead of everyone sitting around being bored watching me, you can all be doing the code and I can walk around and help anyone that's getting stack traces and errors and things. But we're at a point now where we can add feature, add test, add feature, and iterate through. And as we get to the point where actually we've got some stuff we like and we've got some tests we like, we'll add all the other stuff as well, like a deployment pipeline in Jenkins, somewhere in AWS to deploy it, actually have it running all the time online so we can see it and have it update. When we change code and merge to master, it'll update in live. And then we're on the train to having something that is a proper web service that can be used for things. Apart from a database. We'll worry about a database later. Yeah. But that's it. That's it for today.
Thank you.
Cool. Cheers, guys. I'm going to turn the stream off. Stop the stream.